As it should be.
I mean, if you can get a Trebek and a Ventura on your TV show, at some point you probably should.
So that's the thing, right? Like, what am I when that comes out?
Doesn't he say, like, and did you know that Jupiter is the most confused body of, like...
But I'm trying to think, like,
Jesse Ventura?
Am I 25 when that comes out? And I'm like, how have these two never been in a movie together before?
Yeah, Trebek and Ventura. Like, I think I'm 15 when that came out. No, you're not 25.
No, so then
you're 20. You're not 20, but you're like 20 probably, because that's probably like 15, yeah. Ugh, what a horrifying and fantastic. Jose Chung is the best X-Files episode, just so we all are clear on that. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Grimdark Media. Cameras are rolling. We're live.
They see me rolling, they hating.
This is going to be an interesting one, because this is our first patron-produced piece of Grimdark Media.
Yeah.
This was selected by the patrons. This was their first choice from a list of 25 options, which had some real bangers on it, let's be honest. There were some fantastic nominees for a Grimdark piece of gaming media, but they chose the Rangers of Shadowdeep. And we have two different editions of this, because I have my Modifius.
I was going to say, you have doesn't show up on camera edition.
Yeah, I was going to say, I have low contrast mode edition of this.
I think what's interesting about this is, like, when you mentioned that this was...
Yours has a coffee ring on it, sorry.
I know. Well, everything I own has a coffee ring on it.
That's so
Every time I show up in a shirt and it doesn't have a coffee ring right there, you should be happy.
I should be excited.
But it's interesting for me, because I thought it was a cool pick for starters.
Yeah, definitely.
But the other thing is, I think it taps into one of the things that I think is interesting about miniature gaming and hobby gaming in general, which is, I wonder how many people actually think of the themes behind the game, as opposed to it just being a set of tools to play a game. Because the background for it is fantastic. Like, it's super interesting. It's super thematic. It really adds a ton of color. I wonder.
I have a lot to
what
say
percentage of people get that, and what percentage of people are just like, oh, it's just a cool set of rules. I play a skirmish game.
I have so much to say about that, because this was like, I came at this in the beginning, and so some history here. Oh,
that's me dropping everything.
So some history here.
Knock my coffee right off.
As long as it wasn't the coffee. So my original copy of Rangers of Shadowdeep, and you guys can go up in the cards if you want, and check out a complete playthrough of this book. So I played every mission from this book. But I did it from the Word document of the manuscript. Yeah. So I was sent that probably a year or two after I did all the Frostgrave stuff originally, and Joe and I had become friends. And he was like, hey, I've written this new game. I think it's up your alley, but it's a bit strange. It's not a head-to-head game the way that Frostgrave is. It's a cooperative game. And this is pre-pandemic. This is 2018. We didn't know this was going to be a thing we all wanted until we all wanted to be able to play a solo or cooperative miniature game. And Joe, being Joe and being way ahead of the curve, had come up with this idea of making a premise and a game around it. And so my original, like, I got sent this later on. My original copy of this game is literally just the Word document that he's writing to do the manuscript.
I feel like while you're saying this, you should clearly have, like, a toque and a plaid shirt on. Like if you're gonna go gaming hipster, go full hipster.
Oh, is that what you think I'm doing right now? No. I don't mean to say that. I'm just saying I didn't have a copy of this game until I got the Modifius copy. So I'm jealous that you have that copy, because I can never have a first edition hardcover print of Rangers of Shadowdeep, which you have from Drive Thru RPG.
It's a nice coaster too.
It is a great. It's
everything in my house is a great coaster.
Protects your tables. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I'm jealous of the copy you have, which is my short story long of saying that. But yes, I guess it could also be misinterpreted a little bit as I like this band. You've probably never heard of them. But yeah, check out the full playthrough if you want to actually see the game being played. But I think this game was, I'm just going to say it was ahead of its time in that regard.
Absolutely.
In regard to like that sort of like emergence of solo and cooperative gaming in wargaming.
You can almost say, like, I mean, it's, you know, the right product at the right time. You can almost say it laid the template for what a lot of gaming companies were going to have to do a year and a half, 2 years later.
Yeah. And it also pulls from the great traditions of solo role-playing and solo like gaming in general, which were innovated in the 80s and 90s by things like Space Hulk and by things like the Fighting Fantasy books and Lone Wolf and stuff that we love.
We'll get to this when we talk about like product life cycle, but yeah, it does a really good job overall of you can tell what some of the influences were, but it isn't cribbing the homework from those influences.
Well, and funnily enough, because of its structure, it's a game I've never played together.
Yeah.
We both played it, but we've
Yeah.
never actually played together because it can be played in that way. It's funny. I think the only solo cooperative game we played together is a solo game I tried to make cooperative, which was when we played through the beginning. It went so badly.
I remember.
We played the beginning.
I don't remember any of that. I don't remember any of that. That didn't happen. It didn't happen.
It did not go great.
Oh God, Penelope!
Penelope died a horrible death. We got revenge for Penelope. We did get justice for Penelope eventually. Sir Packard Dane has done well. So let's dive in then. Let's, I guess, gather our mustiest green cloak, take our iron swords, and decide if we're going to be like a battle wizard or not. I guess. Do you want to be a battle wizard? Do you want to hire a wizard instead? How Aragorn do you want to get? Do you want to have like an elf slight wizard on retainer you take your stabbed hobbits to?
I want to be an angry militant priest.
Yeah.
That's what I want to do.
Let's
I want to bring the power of goodness to people whether they want it or not.
Cool. Let's head to the border where the watchtowers are in disrepair, and set sail.
Voyage.
How do we set sail? I've completely mixed my metaphors up now. Anyway, it's time for Bon Voyage. All right, so Bon Voyage is where we spoil everything. We spoil the story. We spoil the general narrative of the things that we cover. And that's going to be a bit hard to do in this one because structurally, Rangers of Shadowdeep is designed to be a mystery box.
Well, the
Right
other
from the
thing,
beginning.
too, right, is anything that's inherently interactive media as opposed to something that has a just a straight linear railroady storyline.
Yep.
Some people are going to have played different bits and pieces of it. Some people are like, you're going to be spoiling things for me. I don't know.
I know. Well, I mean, you have the rule book. You could have read forward.
No, but I mean, I'm assuming you're going past that.
I'm not going to go past the rule book.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
I'm going to just cover this rule book today. That's what we start with. So, spoiler alert for the rule book is what I'm going to spoil narratively here is the story that's emerging through the introductory campaign and then the campaign Burning Light, which is in this core rule book. So, again, it's a bit hard to spoil because one of the things Joe does really well is he sets you a recipe book at the start of each of these campaigns saying you're going to want to paint these miniatures to have access to. You're generally going to want to have this kind of terrain in your collection. Now go. And then the emerging narrative unfolds in the story.
Yeah.
And what that story is the story in two parts. The first part is the Night of Green Fire, which is our introductory adventure designed for a level 1 ranger, a level 0 ranger. To be introduced to the Shadowdeep, and it tells the emergent story of the watchtowers basically disappearing, the fall of Larenthia, which is the neighboring kingdom to Alador, and the emergence of the thing called the Shadowdeep. And that's our first thing to explain. It's explained in the first couple pages of this book, and the Shadowdeep is it's if the grim darkness had a manifestation, we would call it the Shadowdeep.
It's the creeping dark. It's
the nothing that's consuming everything. Pick your simile here that you want to talk about in literature. It's the great darkness. It's a consuming evil that has destroyed kingdom after kingdom after kingdom. And in Alador, which is our fair kingdom, it's a bit Princess Bridey in its description. The fair kingdom of Alador is its neighbor has finally fallen. We've known that its neighbor has been struggling for a while, and it's finally collapsed. And the watchtowers built along the border have been done so to basically give like advance warning of the collapse of Larenthia. And it's finally happened. It's finally fallen apart. We know it's all gone, and we have to decide what we're going to do about it. And this adventure is them sending a group of rangers who are constantly patrolling the border. They patrol the wildlands. They have a very Dunedain vibe to them, and that's who you represent in the game terms. Out to find out what's happened.
Night's Watch, if you're not a Lord of the Rings fan.
Sure, yeah.
Out Beyond the Wall.
Yeah, absolutely. They're crows. They're whoever has taken the black, basically. Although they're presented a bit more nobly, I think. They're not the criminals of society that they are. They're not exiles the way they are in Game of Thrones. So you take the position of one of these rangers, and in the first act of this book, you are sent to investigate the Watchtower of Tor Valen. And the Watchtower of Tor Valen is on the border with Larenthia, and it's 5 minutes to midnight. The Kingdom of Alador doesn't know that the Kingdom of Larenthia has fallen yet. They just know that the Watchtowers have gone silent, and the Rangers are being sent to investigate. And this is the Night of Green Fire. You arrive at the watchtower, you fight your way through like a bunch of gnolls where you're like, you become suspicious, like, oh, these are not supposed to be here. This is the border. Something bad has happened.
Yep.
You discover a bunch of like injured soldiers. And as you fight your way to the top of this tower, you investigate it. And I think it's 6 scenes of missions. No, 8 scenes of missions.
Oh, I don't even remember.
No, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. It's 5 scenes of missions. 5 different like adventure rooms, basically, that represent different encounters. You then go through and you find a soldier strapped to a giant like bonfire about to be lit. And as you're fighting, events can happen. You discover that there is a green fire on the watchtower of Tor Gadon, I think it is. Tor Valen and Tor Gadon, which is the neighboring... Tor Dargos, which is the neighboring tower. But it's green. It's not a healthy light, it's a green fire. And as the plot emerges, you realize that all of the watchtowers have gone green. And that's actually the forces of the Shadowdeep signaling to each other that they have now taken the border of Alador. And that the miles basically inside the kingdom now, around the watchtowers, have fallen to the Shadowdeep. And they become taken over. The second part of this, now, and the idea behind this campaign is obviously that it lets you level up to like maybe 5. You fight enough stuff that you accumulate enough experience that you get to like level up.
It follows like structurally as a game, it follows a kind of similar idea to a lot of modern RPGs, where it's almost like your first adventure.
Yeah.
It's the tutorial part of a video game.
Yeah.
Like you're not really playing it as much as you're learning how to play it.
You're experiencing it. Yeah. And Joe does a good job where he presents you with fairly simple encounters. The first one is a village goes quiet. You investigate the village. Everyone's turned into zombies. They have weird bites on them. The second one is you find the things that give them the bites. They're spiders. They have a real, like, the Mists spider vibe to them, where they might be spiders with human faces.
The spider trees are awful.
The spider trees are awful. That's right. We find the rest of the villagers, like, up in the trees, all cocooned up. Then we get to a bridge guarded by gnolls. Then we get to the tower. We investigate the tower and yada yada. Part 2 is, well, the king's been warned now. We know that the border's fallen, that all the Night of Green Fires happened. And they start trying to amass things that could help them slow down either the evacuation process or the encroachment of the Shadowdeep. Because it was years of Larenthia having to deal with this before it actually completely fell. And the idea is that, like, there might be things left in Larenthia that could save the kingdom or help in the defense of the kingdom. And the Rangers get sent to try and retrieve them. And one of these is the Chalice of Burning Light, the Chalice of Saint Amelia. And it was last known to be housed in this convent that has obviously fallen to the Shadowdeep. And so you and your fellow Rangers are sent. And this one is different from the first one, is that it's not a linear adventure. You're presented with a much more procedurally generated sort of like story, in that you advance to the central courtyard, and you're then allowed to explore the rest of the convent kind of in any order that you want. It's a
little sandboxy.
It's a little more sandboxy, but then those things will lead to a final confrontation that allows you to basically get your hands on the Chalice, confront a bunch of like undead minions and monsters inside the ruins of this like convent, and then escape with or without the Chalice of Light. And that can have knock-on effects into the next campaign, which we're not going to spoil here. Temple of Madness is the name of it, if you want to go pick it up. But it's basically a continuation of this narrative of like the Rangers going out and trying to collect all these things and stop the Shadowdeep from advancing as much as possible. And we're given nuggets more information about the Shadowdeep itself, about these like spectral knights, the lieutenants that might be part of it, the evil men, the cultists that might form its like, I don't know, its society after the fall of these kingdoms, and the various monsters in its employ, in particular gnolls, giant spiders, and zombies that are created through the interaction with these things. And that's kind of it. That's as far as this book goes. The idea is you'd be roughly level 10 probably at the end of this mission, which is pretty advanced, and that your companions may or may not have gotten some advances as well through surviving games and leveling up. It does use, interestingly enough, and because the story is going to be slightly different depending upon how you interact with different rooms, it does use a kind of permadeath thing that once you embark on a mission, you don't get new companions.
Right.
So if you're playing it by yourself, there can be a real party attrition thing that happens where people can die. You don't have anybody to step in and take them with you. Whereas if you play it cooperatively, you're usually leaving some companions at home, and you have kind of a pool of people that you can have come with you with your recruitment points between adventures if someone gets knocked out, because they're kind of like back at the bonfire.
Yeah, because mechanically, when you're playing with one or more other players, you're bringing less than half your points value
That's
with your
right.
companions. Like even if you have 100 recruitment points worth of companions,
Yeah.
and even if you're just playing with one other player, you're only bringing 40 recruitment points worth of guys with you.
That's right. So you don't have everybody on the table at all times, which means people can rest, people can get themselves sorted out, and if you lose somebody, it doesn't hurt quite as bad. Whereas if you play it solo, there can be some sting when you lose somebody, because until you end a mission, and a mission can be multiple acts, you don't get to go back to base sort of and find new recruits to take with you. And I only point that out because that adds to both the tension and also both the themes that we'll talk about later on. Did you have anything you want to add to the story-wise? Because I don't want to spoil Burning Light for you too much.
No, for sure.
It's giving you the overview there.
Yeah,
but that's the general sort of like thrust of the story.
I think the big thing is again, so what I kind of touched on earlier, and I think we'll come back to it probably a couple times, is the fact that in the context of, because again, I think a lot of people are looking at it as a fantasy miniature skirmish game first,
right,
and it's a narrative second. And I think when you actually look at the story, like you look at the fact that what you're fighting against is this vaguely defined, poorly described, but ultimately so far completely unstoppable evil. Mm-hmm. This is where the whole Grimdark thing comes in, because it doesn't feel so much like in a classic heroic story you're trying to stop the evil force. This feels less like you're trying to stop the evil force and more like you're trying to hold the clock at 5 minutes to midnight. You're not trying to push it back. You're just trying to hold on to what you have.
And it's funny because I think that's a very knowing a bit about what Joe likes, just knowing him, and we'll talk about that in themes later on. That is maybe in this next segment. That's actually a thing that I think he does very well, and that is part of, I think, his favorite fiction and narratives in this sort of like genre, especially in dark fantasy and fantasy in general, is the idea that you can't punch the bat. There's no Sauron to punch in this one.
Yeah.
Right? Like the idea, and even like that idea of like the return of a great darkness, it doesn't have a face or a name. There isn't someone to go and like assassinate and whatever that
it's not Jimmy the Necromancer.
Yeah, exactly. There isn't like a big bad you can just take out. There's no Night King. There's no central leadership even. And this is like well, we'll get to it with the themes, but this is a thing that is so big that you can't necessarily fight. One man can't fight it. The most you can do is slow it down and find ways of like disrupting it. It's a guerrilla war.
But
that feeds that Rangers.
But I think those themes and how they feed into that narrative is what makes the game unique. Like the game mechanically is sound. I love the game. Like the game's fun to play. But without those trappings, it would be very generic. Like it wouldn't have the flavor that it has. I love the flavor that it has.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And then I guess that is going to have us arrive. The Watchtower's fallen. We've arrived in an ancient village, and we see the collapsed sort of like tents of some traveling carnival that was caught in the Shadowdeep in Laurenti when it falls. And inside there's a house of different like I guess freaks and geeks that we're gonna walk through now. The
Jim Rose Circus Sideshow. That's right. That's our villains.
And as the Rangers like poke and prod at it all, we see these pictures and drawings. We have to decide: are we going to investigate what the show was about, or are we gonna go and investigate the gift shop and buy some of these trappings as we get to the Dark exhibition? All right, so the Dark Exhibition, this is our segment where we talk about whether this falls into the category of something being created as art or as a product. And I'm going to lead this one because I think that this is one of the best examples of something being a product in a really good way. I think this is one of the times where I'm so satisfied by this as a product, by its structure and the way that it's presented, that is a opportunity for us to talk about that being done right. Because this is a mystery box. It's presented as a mystery box. It's presented as a dark, unknowable, grim theme. And then here is episodically the next installment of that story that will give you a little bit more information about what that means, what it is, and how it works. Its premise, and you get more and more recurrent punchlines basically over and over as Joe writes the expansions for Rangers of Shadowdeep and the things that add the next layer of adventure or story or whatever to have happen. And I really appreciate that about it. Like, I am not mad at the to be continued ... nature of a mystery box when I'm enjoying the journey that's being provided along the way.
No, it feels like a well-written, engaging, enjoyable, serialized story.
Yeah. And I know I'm not going to get to punch a Sauron probably at the end of it, because that's not the point, right? The wagon train never, like, Star Trek never ends. There's no end to Star Trek, unless you're Voyager, which was probably the problem. But there's
One
no...
of the problems.
What? You know, like Tuvix? But the idea that something can be created structurally to be episodic and to allow the creator to make more stories inside the same universe and to be intentionally vague about the sort of nature of what the threat is and its protagonists and its stories, so that you have this sandbox to play inside of. I think that the nature of the soundbox is so good, and the basic premise in the storytelling is so good, and the invitation to write your own stories inside is so good that's why this has been so successful for him, and that's why you enjoy the new content as it comes out, because you're waiting for that next, well, what's his adventure going to be? What's his thing going to be that he has happen? So we have Menagerie add animals to it. We have Into the Wastes add like a new setting where it doesn't feel quite so Middle Earthy, and it goes to like this like sort of desert, tribal wasteland kind of area. You feel like you're going to a new part of the map in Zelda. You're going, you know what I mean? Like, you feel like you're unlocking that new location in Zelda where you get to see kind of like a different culture in a different way, but in the same themes of like this Rangers of Shadowdeep thing. So what was your take on it?
So yeah, I'm going to disagree.
Okay.
So I understand what you're saying. I think there's a lot of truth in what you're saying. I took it as art, not product. And
okay.
I'll be honest, it's weird. I'm about to break it down in a way that I hate it when people break things down this way.
Okay.
I like people to explain what a thing is or what it's supposed to be or what it wants to be, not what it isn't.
Okay.
But in this case, what defines it as art to me is what it isn't. And where I'm coming from with that is, as somebody who's played a lot of different fantasy games, fantasy role-playing games, fantasy miniature games, read fantasy novels, watched fantasy movies, whatever, what I love about this is I feel all the influences in it, but I don't see right through it to its source material.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
So I feel like I can, and you could probably easily correct me for being wrong here because Joe and I don't.
Yeah.
But like I feel like I can understand a lot of what inspired different aspects of what he was doing. But at no point does it feel derivative of those things.
Sure.
Like it feels like somebody who was like, I enjoyed all these things. I want to create something, but these things were my inspiration. So back to, I'm going to say our first video when we talked about defining art versus product. Mm-hmm. This to me feels like a guy who read the liner notes in every album he ever bought. Right?
Okay.
And again, there's moments where I feel like, oh, this feels like this feels like that. But that you could easily make the argument that, well, actually, no, I was actually thinking about this other thing or this. So for me, like the whole, the kingdom next to you falling, like the fact that you're basically traveling into what is effectively this wasteland that's slowly becoming, let's say, a necropolis with all the zombies and everything. But your fairy tale land is still, you're fine. You're doing fine until you're not. That feels very Ravenlofty to me.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that was his inspiration for it, but I love the fact that it feels that way. Mm-hmm. So for me, it feels like a sincere effort by somebody to create something that is uniquely its own thing while not doing anything to hide the fact that it was influenced by other things that came before it.
There's a love of Tolkien, and there's a love of that almost like bright fantasy. But he's taken it to that. He's inverted it. He's like subverted that.
And I talk a lot.
It a Doom that's coming.
I talk a lot about the fact that one of the things I wish more people would do more often is just let people unironically enjoy things. If you like a thing, just like the thing. It's cool. Enjoy the thing. Absorb the thing. And this feels like a labor of love. Like this to me feels like somebody's passion project.
Yeah, it feels like, to me, this always felt like Joe would love to be the DM of everybody's D&D game.
Yeah.
But he can't do that, so he's giving a way for you to be in his D&D game at home without him being there. Like, that's always what this felt like to me, is because he has a real passion for role-playing games, is that earnest effort to try and present people with that experience. And I think one of the things he's done really well, and we can talk about this structurally too, is you're talking about the thematic nods. I would say there's a lot of structural nods as well. The paragraph style stuff of revealing information, where if X event happens, then turn to Y paragraph.
Yep.
That's a very, like, obviously, influenced by Choose Your Own Adventure books, sort of like methodology for revealing information. There's lots of like structural nods in that same vein, where I see what you're talking about, where he's taken, this is the right thing, this is the right ingredient for me to present the information this way, for you to feel a certain way while you're playing the game, either by yourself or with a friend, where you get to have these aha moments, these things that give you this like lasting consequence, or this bit of information, or this item that may not be relevant right now but might be relevant later on down the road. And maybe it's all building towards something, and maybe it's not, and maybe these are red herrings, and maybe they're not. But now I've got the creative freedom as the person that wants to present you with this experience to now write into this experience or write into that experience.
So it can be product. It can be product that he wants to sell and that, quite frankly, I want to buy.
Yeah.
But when I'm absorbing it, it's just art to me. Like, I'm not conscious of what I'm buying or how I'm buying it or the way in which I'm being this is even though it has nothing to do with the game itself, the easiest way for me to present that is when I first got the game. I love the fact that at the start of each chapter break, it tells you what you're going to need, like that idea of what models and what scenery you're going to need. And literally, as soon as I got that, I'm like, okay, I got to get all these miniatures that I don't have. At no point was I consciously thinking these are purchases. These are things I need to buy. And these aren't things that the
I'm
author...
collecting right now to have this
And these aren't
experience.
things that the author is selling to me, because he doesn't have his own miniature line. But it's one of those things that for me, it was like, I need to have this. This needs to be in my collection. I need to do this. This is a project. I was enjoying it for what it was, rather than focusing on the real world tasks of making it happen.
It's funny because when you talk about a subscription-based business model, what Joe's done really well here, I think, is he's created a console. This is the console for the game that he's making, and then he's releasing you new games over time for you to play it, and that's where it's so funny because usually you and I come at this from the opposite side. You're coming from the feeling side, and I'm coming from the business side this time around. Where, like, I see this as a great blend of all of those things that ends up being this like structurally enjoyable thing, where because it's such a palatable way to consume product and it's done over time and it's done in that way, I feel really good about it and I want to support them and I want to keep doing it. And you're looking at it from going like, look at all these great elements and the way that he blended them together and how this feels like art. That's really cool. That's really interesting. So then I guess having both, we split the party. We're not supposed to do that.
Yeah,
we split the party through...
This is what happens when you have two rangers and not as many companions as you expected to have.
So one of the rangers went off and we started exploring the tents. And I'm stuck in the gift shop.
I was going to say, I'll go explore this mysterious barn by myself. I'm sure nothing bad will happen.
I'm sure this one ended poorly for us. Well, we've been ambushed then. We've been ambushed by the
gnolls are upon us.
The gnolls are upon us. We've been kidnapped and locked up in the ruins of an ancient asylum. All right, so this is the Grim Asylum. This is where we start talking about themes and what themes we pick out, what we thought were the strongest themes. So there's by no means like a requirement for it to have all of the themes that we talk about that we think make up the Grimdark media, but we picked the ones that we felt were like the most present overall inside of this stuff. So I'm gonna have you go first this time because I went first last time. When you talk about some of the Grim themes that you pulled out of Rangers of Shadowdeep.
Yeah, and again, it's interesting how it's presented because if you think about it, it's a miniature skirmish game. It has a lot of role-playing game elements to it.
Sure.
And if you think about it more in the role-playing game vein, it's interesting because you're both the player and the game master, right? So how you see it top down and how you see it inside looking out can be different. So to me, the first thing I kind of tapped into is the notion of fate and futility. And it's you are going on these quests, and from your point of view, from your character's point of view, I should say, sorry, from the inside looking out, you're trying to win, whatever win looks like, right? Like you are trying to find the thing that's going to help you fight the darkness. But from the top-down point of view, like I said earlier, you're just trying to hold the clock as close to midnight as it is. Like you're not going to win. You're not going to push the darkness back. You're just trying to keep it from encroaching forward. Mm-hmm. So there's all this like entropy and decay and around you, but it feels like your thing is that you are a hamster on a wheel. If you run fast enough, you'll still be standing still, right? Yep. Like you won't actually accomplish anything. And I love that. Like, because again, that is thematically, that's what makes it feel like a true piece of grimdark media as opposed to a generic kind of fantasy thing to me.
Mm-hmm. It's funny because I picked that too as one of my I had 3 total themes. Futility for me was beneath another one of them, but it was definitely one of the strong themes of like it's the boat sprung a leak, and no matter how fast you bail, you can see shore off in the distance. You might get there and you might not. You're probably not going to get
dig
there.
Up, stupid.
Yeah, you're probably not going to get towards shore. But the idea of that like dying of the light and the sense of nobility that comes from that for your cause, I think it's a one of those like tragic elements, that tragic futility. Feels like it's always baked into the missions as Joe writes them, and all the stories as well, where it's like, yeah, you got to Tor Valen and yeah, you rescued one guard, but you're literally walking through like the corpses of a village that's been killed by murder spiders or demonic spiders, and all of the like horror of what's going on around you. Rescuing one person is this like noble endeavor, and it's what you are meant to do as rangers, but ultimately that one person nothing's getting saved.
No.
It didn't save the kingdom. You just got them away, and the Night of Green Fire still happens, and the border still collapses, and it's all still going wrong around you while it's happening. Yeah, I was 100% with you for that one. But my top level one then, above that, and maybe we'll go back and forth.
Sure.
Is entropy. Is the idea of that it's because it's so firmly baked into the very first page, the introduction of what Rangers of Shadowdeep is that the kingdoms around you have all fallen.
Yep.
And eventually it's on your doorstep. That the world is slowly sliding into the Shadowdeep, and that no matter how noble and sort of like right your tradition is in Alador, that you've finally lost your final neighbor, and that over the centuries the Shadowdeep has consumed everything, and that now it's your turn. That idea of entropy feels like it is the overriding like theme of Rangers, that everything, the light is slowly going out.
So it's interesting to me because this goes back. So I had entropy as my second thing.
Okay.
Because this to me goes back to what I was saying about the difference between the character POV versus the player POV. Okay. Because the character POV, like I said, that's that fate piece to me. Those characters probably believe that there's a win somewhere. Like they probably believe that things can get better. But you looking down at it from the backstory point of view as a player, no, I don't think so. Like it's just a question of time. It's waves crashing on the shore. Eventually the rocks give way to the water. And so I did actually have entropy as my second thing for largely the same reasons you do. Like the way the world at large is presented, that is definitely what's going on there. I think that again the difference in our point of view is whether or not are you talking about it as a player or as a character inside the world. Yeah,
and where as the player you see the big picture, but the reason that you're rooting for your protagonist PC is because they see it as, no, we're going to help this, they're going to survive, we're going to live another day. And it's always just about living another day, basically.
So as a player, I would probably put entropy first.
Yeah.
From inside looking out, I would probably put it second.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because they're not, their concerns are so immediate that the whole like theme of entropy basically sits below that. Like they're just trying to live another moment, another day, another hour, whatever it is. Okay. So what was your last one?
My last one was fear.
Okay.
So there's a lot of we've got a lot of things on the menu that we could pick from, and they certainly all apply to different degrees. But the reason I chose fear, and part of it is probably to go back to the product side of it, is the whole mystery box thing, right? Is that you don't know what's coming next. You don't know what's next. And yeah, you're facing death, and you're facing the end, and you're facing possibly an infinite void. Who knows what lies beyond the Shadow Deep, right? But I think the thing is, like, when you talk about your last neighbor falling and now it's just you against the world, are you doing it because are you fighting back because it's the right thing to do? Are you fighting back because it's the noble thing to do, or are you fighting back because how horrible is what comes next? Right? Are you Justin after he wakes up in Event Horizon? Right? Like, are you worried about what lies on the other side? Are you afraid of what will happen to your friends, your family, your kingdom? Fear seems to be the overriding theme to me.
Interesting. I did not go with fear. I went with incomprehensibility. And maybe to me that feels like it's the source spring of that fear. And because structurally the idea is we never know what the Shadow Deep wants. Like I said, it doesn't have a Sauron to punch. It doesn't have an agenda. It doesn't seem to have even like officers or minions so much. Like, it just is this thing that is an evil that is consuming everything. And that's kind of the wellspring from which these other kind of emotional palettes and moments kind of come from. And that's also the thing you're investigating, right? That's what the Rangers are here for, is to try and figure that story out. And that's the nature of the mystery box that Joe's presenting. Like, we don't know what it wants or why it is or what it's coming from. We don't know its origin or its story, and it's not explained. That incomprehensibility, I think, is baked into Rangers of Shadowdeep because that's what provides us with the room to write whatever story Joe wants, and for us as people enjoying it to write our own stories if we want to as well, because ultimately it's the canvas all of this stuff is going to be like splattered on. And that's why the story can take place anywhere, and it can have whatever we want as like the bad guys, the good guys, the protagonist. We have this fallen kingdom, in its final minutes, 5 minutes to Midnight Kingdom as our setting, but we don't know anything else about the threat or the monster or the villain, and that's the scariest part about it, is we can't give it what it wants. We can't make it go away because we can't give it what it wants.
I think what's interesting to me is that to use a metaphor, a comparison, I guess, is, and again, it treads a line between fear and incomprehensibility. To me, as the Ranger, you're Thomas Jane still sitting inside the car 1 minute before the end of the movie, The Mist, right? Like, are you motivated to act because of your fear of what's next, or because what's next is inconceivable to you? Because it could be both. It could be both.
Yeah, and like, I could see that too. Yeah, interesting. Well, we've talked about the themes. We've shaken off our shackles and been rescued by the rest of our warband who showed up to get us out. They kicked the door in and killed the Knolls. Thank God we left half the party somewhere.
They're the backup party.
They're the real Rangers.
They're the Eagles in Lord of the Rings. They're the helicarriers in the Marvel movies.
Yeah. They're the Arwen Evans stars that show up and defeat all 9 ring wraiths somehow.
It's water. Water.
It was the water horses. Yeah, you're right. But now it's time to place this. We find a giant pile of Gnoll skulls that the rest of the party have now created, and we have to pick a place to put this.
Can I just say, really, not enough games are using Gnolls.
No,
God, I love Gnolls. They're so good. Joe brought back the Gnolls. Yeah. He made Gnolls a thing again. Like he really did create a Gnoll renaissance in Gnoll miniatures. We didn't have enough plastic Gnoll kits, and I think Frostgrave created and Rangers created a need for plastic. As an old school D&D player, I was so happy to have Gnolls come front and center.
Thanks to Nick at North Star for creating plastic Gnolls. I'm gonna stand for Gnolls for a second. All right, we're on to the Skull Throne. All right, so this is the portion where we have to curate our lists. We have 6 things on the list now. Jay and I are still in heavy disagreement as to what it means to be on this list, and I love that about this segment.
Yeah.
And we're going to go last to first, and maybe we'll go back and forth. We'll do 6, 6, 5, 5, 4, 4, 3, 3, 2, 2, 1.
Well, 6 and 1 is going to be where we disagree the most, so.
And we'll see. All right, so my number 6 with a bullet is Rangers of Shadowdeep. I would never even have picked this to be I was surprised this was what the patrons wanted, because and when I understand it now, having gone through it, but it's not something because it's not as punk rock as some of the things we pick, where like it's a lot more like the spiky metal chaotic themes of grimdark media, like the chaos star in the hold of a ship and the space marines and stuff like that. This isn't something I would have necessarily thought for us to explore, and I do see the themes, but I don't know how it stacks against the other things we have as far as being grim.
And on that front, I come back to what I said at the start, which is I think I wouldn't have guessed it either. I wouldn't have picked it.
Yeah.
But as soon as it got picked, I'm like, yeah, 100%. Like 100% it's a good choice. So
what's your number 6?
So what's my number 6? You know what my number 6 is? It's The Last of Us Part 2. I still get where you're coming from, but the more I think about it, the more I'm comfortable with it being at the bottom of the list.
Yeah, that's fine.
Because for me, the issue with The Last of Us Part 2 is that people can have happy endings. People in that world can make choices, and it can be okay. It can't be great, but it can be okay.
Okay. Number 5, Event Horizon.
Number 5, I went Astartes.
Yeah. Number 4, Hard Boiled.
4 is where I put Event Horizon.
Ooh. Number 3, Astartes.
3 is where I put Rangers of Shadowdeep.
Whoa! Awesome. Number 2, Call of Cthulhu.
I did Hard Boiled at number 2.
Wow. I mean, I know you did, but awesome. And then number 1, I subbed The Last of Us Part 2 is the grimmest, darkest thing I think I've interacted with in a while.
And I still put the Call of Cthulhu
I know you did.
because these are clearly the two poles we're gonna tug a war against forever. We're gonna get to 100, and my last and my first and your last and your first are probably gonna end.
It's not gonna matter as soon as we get to 21 and something drops off your top 20 list.
I guess
it's just gonna be The Last of Us Part 2, and then we won't talk about it anymore. Awesome. Well, that was again, like I said, I'm so glad the patrons picked this one.
Yeah.
Because this is what I wanted the patron produced segment part to be, where we get something we wouldn't necessarily have thought of, and we have to really examine it and dive into it. So next patron produced piece of content is going to be film media for January,
cool.
Which I'm excited about. And right now, we checked this morning basically when we were recording this, and right now it's like it was originally a weird neck and neck, but right now it's a neck and neck between The Thing, Akira, and Dread. And those are the things that, so if you're a patron and you're watching this and you haven't voted yet, go vote, because I think we're like 200 votes in right now. But yeah, it's a big neck and neck right now, and I was surprised by a few of them that also get some honorable mentions. Like there was initially a big push for them in the Month of Madness, which is going to make you very happy.
My God, that would make me so happy.
Our Sam Neill trilogy could have continued.
Yes. Then all we need to do is we do Daybreakers.
Yeah. Or if we end up having them pick Ghost Ship somehow. But I don't think
I'm starting to think that like
it's too horror.
I'm starting to think the movies and books and things that we talk about that aren't actually grimdark become like
more grimdark.
The B-side.
Well,
it's like the B-side of everything we do.
Maybe we just end up with like an Ash and Jay Go to the Movies series where we do that too. But what's funny is we could just start a Carl Urban trilogy too, because we could have Carl Urban in Dread, and that could lead to Carl Urban in like Doom, or Carl Urban in I was gonna say Ghost Ship, because he's also weirdly in Ghost Ship.
Yeah, he's in Ghost Ship.
Playing a real not Carl Urban type.
How are we making everything about Ghost Ship? I love that we're making everything about Ghost Ship. And you know what? Now that we've dusted off another, oh my God, do people actually want to see this movie? I love Doom. I love that movie.
You unironically love Doom.
I love that movie.
It has such a weird cast.
If you ask me to say, is this objectively a good movie? I will tell you no. It is in fact not objectively a good movie. I love it.
It's like the 2000s
so
Event Horizon though.
Much.
You know what I mean? Like if you take Event Horizon, you move it 10 years in the future, it's an ensemble cast of like those people again.
You can't tell me a movie doesn't qualify as grimdark when you have a skinny, hatchet-faced guy wandering around continually mumbling about Satan devouring people.
You're not wrong.
Oh my God!
It is
goat is the goat.
But honestly, Doom is to like actors in the 2000s what Event Horizon was to actors in the 90s. It has such a crazy stacked cast, like of where they are today versus where they were back then. It's wild. So anyway, we'll see what the patrons pick for January. I'm excited. January picks for me. I get to pick. What is it I'm picking this time around? I'm picking game media. I'm picking game media, and you're picking book because we just did the vice versa. Because you picked Call of Cthulhu, I picked. Oh no, you're picking game media. I'm picking book.
Got it.
I think because I just picked hard boiled. No, we already did hard boiled. I don't know where we're at right now.
I'm lost.
I'm lost too.
I've lost.
I'm gonna say you're going to pick game media. I'm gonna pick book. Because you picked film last time, I picked book last time, but the patrons...
What's our sequence, though? Because we just did game media. Like, we're doing it now.
Yes. It goes movie, book, game media. Movie, book, game media. So we just got to
God, I hope nobody watches this part at the end.
Where we both just forget what we're doing. Anyway, we'll figure this out. I hope you enjoyed this one. Bye, everybody.
See you later.